these devices, they're not cheap, right? Like they can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, as much as a Lamborghini. Let's talk numbers. What kind of revenue can these devices put out? What would you say is the biggest mistake you see these clinic owners make when purchasing a device? Welcome to Seven Figure Practices, a value-packed podcast dedicated to sales, marketing, operations, and profitability, where we interview seven-figure clinic owners and impact players in the aesthetic and peptide space. Hosted by myself, Daniel Walton, founder of Patient Acquisition, a growth partner specializing in paid ads, influencer strategy, UGC, lead gen, and lead conversions. And today we have a very special guest, aside from being my friend and my companion exploring the best taco spots in Orange County.
Yep.
You guys probably know him for his in-depth knowledge about everything lasers. So if you're considering buying a laser, or if you have a laser that's just collecting dust and not quite as busy as you want it, this episode is for you. We're going to break down everything lasers, how to sell them, what you need to know before buying a laser. And I'd like to welcome David DeStefano. Did I say that right?
Close enough. David DeStefano. So currently I work for Lumenis. They're the oldest and largest medical laser company in the world. It's not where I got my start in aesthetics, but it's where I'm at now, and it's been fun so far. So they're been a good company.
Yeah. So first off, I guess, like, what got you into aesthetics in the first place?
I wanted to get into medical device sales. I used to do outside sales in aerospace, industrial manufacturing. That was my dad that got me into that, and it's a great start. But I started meeting all these people doing medical device sales, just from friends and colleagues, and everyone made way more money. So I was like, well, if I can sell welding robotics to engineers at Hyperloop and other Elon Musk companies, I can probably figure out a medical device that I can sell to a doctor. So I started interviewing, looked at surgical, realized I didn't want to be on call for surgery on Christmas Eve, and found aesthetics. I related to it. Everyone has different things they would improve on themselves, and aesthetics fits perfectly with that.
Yeah.
Interviewed as much as I could, right? Found the right fit, and I ended up interviewing with basically some of the most major laser companies in the space. And the first company I joined was Cyton, and I was there 3.5 years, and it was a good experience. Yeah.
So what you're saying is you're a big nerd.
Huge nerd. Oh yeah. I those that know me know I am massive nerd when it comes to lasers, all sorts of other random crap. Like, I think my laser physics and understanding of wavelengths kind of came from my aquarium keeping hobby, of all things, because wavelengths are important for growing coral, as well as wavelengths are important for ablating tissue. So I'm just a huge nerd. So I like to go down the laser physics rabbit hole with people when I can.
Right. And I think that's what stood out too about you when I connected with you, was like, I could tell you were just very passionate about it. I've met a lot of reps and most of them are in it for only one reason, which is the money, right? And we all got to be money motivated. That's why people are watching this show right now.
Yep.
Is they want to make more money. They want to sell more. They want to become more profitable. That's what I help people do. That's what you help people do. Money is great, but if that's the only thing that you're in something for, there can run, that's where greed comes in, and there's all these other problems, which we don't have to get into. But that was the thing that stood out the most about you versus all these other reps, is you were highly knowledgeable about the actual science, and you were very passionate about it too. And your background's in engineering, which I dropped out of engineering school, and I know engineers don't make that much money unless they know how to sell. And then that's where they can make a lot of money getting into other sales-based positions.
Yep. Yeah, no, sales is where the money is at, unless you end up being a plastic surgeon. But
right,
you need your sales guys too.
But all the best surgeons, they're all pretty good at sales too.
Oh yeah, they go hand in hand.
They know how to sell. They know how to push procedures. But so with this, we just wanted to provide as much value to the market. I think a lot of people, especially a lot of clinic owners, they're not necessarily sure what device is going to be best for them. How much should I be spending on a device? And so we're going to be breaking all of those things down. I think starting with staying informed about trends, like what's trending right now, what is actually a good place that these clinics can actually go to, or where can they learn about what is like the hot thing so that they can stay ahead of these trends. Because as you know, once something starts trending, you have a very short window to really be profitable before everybody, all your neighbors, all your competition starts doing it. So where's the best place for these clinic owners to go, these doctors, to learn about aesthetic trends and what's emerging?
Yeah. So trends are kind of a tricky thing to follow. I think social media is going to be important with that, going to trade shows, networking with different people, but also like, being a rep, there's a lot of times I go into an office and I'm like the 10th rep they've seen that day, right? And you're like, oh God, another rep. But at the same time, if you don't know me, you've never seen me before, you don't know what company I have, you really don't know if I have something that could be truly impactful for your clinic. So I think it's very easy to just be blinded by all the noise and just kind of put your head down. And sometimes that can be effective, but you're also going to be shutting out anything that could be new out there. And I think a trend that's been picking up lately has been hair restoration and peptides. Like those are probably some of the two newest and hottest things that are out. A couple years ago it was filler. That's definitely died down and people are more in that natural aesthetic.
Right.
Where skin is a bigger focus than filler is right now.
Right. And that's why I see lasers doing well too. I know I personally, like, I've always been more holistic in my medicine and everything. What can I do naturally? Running marketing for all these clinics, I've always wanted to take care of my mom and be like, Mom, what do you want? What treatments? Like, I know all the best places to go, and she's like, I don't want to do any of it, but I'm down for a laser, and my mom, like, she wouldn't even give us Advil. It was just like, if you're not dying, like, then we're not going to the hospital, right? You're just gonna have to suck it up. So I know with holistic really emerging, and I think a lot of people looking for more natural remedies, why has lasers really been that, like, go-to solution for aesthetics?
Yeah, well, I think the holistic natural side, like, what a laser is doing is we're using whatever the wavelength is to basically have your body cause a healing response and heal itself naturally, right? Like, so we're not like, filler's great. I know some amazing injectors, but you're basically adding a substance to artificially inflate the volume, right? Or maybe replace the lost volume over time, but you're still doing that artificially. A laser, we're causing an injury into the skin or blood vessels or whatever the target is. And it's the body's own natural healing responses that give you that outcome. There's nothing more natural than your own body's healing.
Right.
So, and that's what the lasers are doing.
Right. And so where has this, like, trend toward lasers? Because, I mean, lasers, they've been around for a long time, right?
Yeah,
the 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah, it started with, like, I know, like, tattoo removal and I think burning
CO2 was the OG. Yep. Yeah. And that's, where my current company got their start. I mean, they basically invented the first CO2 back in the day for medical purposes. Go on. I don't want to.
Yeah, no. So what I was asking was, like, where do these demands come from? Is it from, these 10 reps a day banging down the door saying, buy this thing? Or does it stem from the market, from the patients, like, wanting these treatments?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a little bit of both, but it's always going to stem from the patient, right? Like, and my goal as a rep and as a salesperson is, I want to, sell you something, but I want to sell you something that's fitting your need. It's giving you that desired endpoint or that goal, whether it's an emotional thing that you have or a problem that I'm helping you solve. And, patients are always looking to do things to, either improve their skin or enhance their health in some way, right? No one likes aging. There's, in my opinion, kind of like three main buckets of how we show aging. And so when someone is, here's a photo of me when I was 18 or in my early 20s and now I'm, 45 or 65, how do I undo that, right? And so without that patient demand, if there was no aging, there'd be no point to have a laser, right?
Yeah. What are those three main points of aging?
So in my opinion, you have essentially color changes, volume changes, and then texture changes that happen over time. There's been some really great surgeons that have done some videos on this too, but essentially color changes as time goes on. Typically you're getting additional sun damage. So you have dyschromia or basically excess pigmentation that is irregular. Or sometimes if it's, like rosacea, more of like a genetic vascular concern can be a color change. So like reds and browns is a common like catch-all term. Texture changes over time as you age. You have skin laxity. Your skin tends to get more crepey or leathery, right? So those are all the texture. Wrinkles can kind of fall under that. and then volume changes. So as you age, you have both muscle atrophy and fat atrophy, so fat loss that happens over time. So as your skin and your muscles all start to sag and you lose volume, that's when everyone looks kind of like gaunt or hollow, and they have the turkey neck or whatever other thing they're going to point out, right? So that's that related to the volume. And there's usually some combination of both or all three happening. And so when you compare a photo of someone, 18 versus 80, there's color changes, texture, and volume changes. And sometimes laser is going to be the answer. Sometimes it's going to be surgery. Maybe it's a neurotoxin, whether it's Dysport, Jeuveau, Botox, and that's where I think when doing a patient consultation, you should really take this holistic look of, hey, why are you here? What are you looking for? Maybe it was a Groupon special is why you're here. But realistically, there's things that you want to enhance about yourself or restore. Right. And how do I help you do that?
Right. So touching on the consultation process, right? How many clinics are actually like talking about these three, main components? Because I think as a patient, right, as somebody who's just looking in the mirror every day at themselves, they're not thinking like, oh, well, this is a texture issue or this is a, skin color issue. They're just seeing this flaw and they're like, I want to change this thing. So how important is the consultative process, and how are clinics, that are doing the consultative process right, how are they doing it differently than the clinics that aren't?
Yeah, so I think, if you're a really high volume, successful practice, you're probably doing this already. But when you have a patient that sits down and they're pointing out something that, they're hoping to improve or slightly tweak or change, like, ideally you're going to do it in a way that's, one, kind and professional to that patient. You don't want to twist the knife, make it worse. But if you're doing it well and they're like, oh, well, I don't like these wrinkles. Okay, well, something that will also highlight this is, we can use some Botox to soften and smooth these wrinkles, but part of these wrinkles are also relating of excess sun exposure and sun damage. And so this is where a laser is going to fit in. Mm-hmm. And it can take someone who came in maybe just for a couple units of Botox to someone who is also getting laser, and you get this, higher ticket sale, and which is obviously better for your clinic, but it's also better for the patient. Assuming it's within the budget and what they're capable of doing. If that person, if their skin's brighter and smoother, their skin's tighter, they're having less wrinkles, they're feeling better and more confident about themselves, you're genuinely helping that person. That's something about aesthetics that I enjoy. It's a very different side of medicine, but it can be done with ethics and in a way to actually improve people's lives.
Right. Yeah, because when you look better, you feel better.
Yeah. And when you feel better, you perform better.
You do better. Yep, 100%. So I think when most people think of lasers, they just think of some like laser beam that can just penetrate anything. But that's obviously not what you guys are shooting into these or using on these patients. So what are the main types of lasers and the main types of treatments that are being used today?
Yeah. So, some of the staples are going to be CO2 or Nd:YAGs 1064s. IPL, not technically a laser, but IPL is always thrown into that category and is very popular. You have non-ablative fractional lasers have gotten to be very popular. So there's different like 1927, 1565, 1550. Those are all the different wavelengths that a lot of the providers will obviously get. And there's different brand names going around that are tied to them. But, as the non-ablative lasers have picked up, the reasoning for that is you can get these really good results, but maybe a little bit more gradually and with less downtime.
Right. It's
kind of the old school way of lasers. You do this crazy CO2 blast off someone's face and they get a good result, but you also hid inside the house for like 3 weeks as you healed and looked like a burn victim, versus I'll get 2-3 laser sessions from something non-ablative, get a great result, and didn't really impact my life too much.
Right. Yeah. And as someone who runs the marketing for a lot of these companies, that's one of the common questions that these patients are asking is like, okay, this sounds great, but how long is the downtime on this? Yep. Right. So that's where these non-ablative have blown up recently, is because they can get a treatment, they can come in 2 or 3 times, get the same result as a CO2, but they don't have a fraction of the downtime, and they can go back to day-to-day life in a much faster time frame.
Yeah, I would say get close to the same result, right? Like there's always going to be that trade-off, but it's kind of up to, that patient's perspective. Like nothing's going to truly replace a CO2 or a heavy erbium ablative treatment.
Right.
But there, again, you have that trade-off with it. So it's kind of up to the patient. And I think this is a good thing for, the provider to, when consulting, is, hey, what is your end result? and how quickly do you want to be there, and what are you willing to put up with to get there?
Right.
Right? Like there are some people who are like, dude, it's wintertime. I work from home. I don't have a lot of Zooms. Blast me. I want to be ready for like my son's wedding.
Right.
Right. And there's others that are like, well, I'm in the public a lot. I always go out for dinners and hang out with friends. I want to have a more gradual improvement where people just say, oh, your skin looks really nice. And it's, you have those improvements without needing to hide inside the house for, 2-3 weeks.
Right. So with timing and the downtime being a major contributing factor for these patients, when do most of these patients get these laser treatments? Like when is lasers busy? When is the time to be really doing laser promos and really promoting them in clinic?
Yeah. So, it's traditionally thought that, laser season is fall to spring, avoiding summer. That's when most people are in the sun. They're not really the most compliant patients. They're also traveling. But with the right wavelengths and right lasers, like you can treat all skin types year round. You might use slightly different settings. It really depends on what devices you have and also your skill sets as a provider partnered with that patient and their ability to follow post-care instructions. So short answer is winter and the surrounding months, but ideally you're going to have something that you can do year round, treat patients year round, make good money year round. And to answer your question on like when to run promos, I think it's good to kind of bulk it into two sections. One, when you're slowest is a great time to do promos, right? Like that's the best time to buy is when like if I don't have patients, I need to get something to hook them and bring them in.
Right.
Typically price is a good way to do that.
Right.
Also, if you're trying to buy a laser from me, if it's my super busiest season, typically Q4 end of the year, a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to get the best price this year. Because it's December. And you're like, well, maybe, but maybe not. Like,
yeah,
I'm also swamped.
So when is the best time to buy a device?
I can make an argument any time of the year, right? But realistically, I think if it's fitting a need for your clinic and it's going to enhance your revenue, then that time is probably now.
Right. Historically, a lot of people, a lot of business owners, they're buying it for tax write-offs. I made all this money.
Yep.
I need to make no money by the end of the year so that I don't have to pay the government any taxes.
Yep.
Right. So why are there benefits to buying it not in Q4?
Yeah. So yeah, that's the classic reason for Q4, right? I met with my tax attorney, my CPA, and I need to write off $200,000. Or hopefully the sales rep didn't hit his number and I can like get a crazy deal from him. But I think a great time to buy is typically going to be spring, summer. And the reason is, one, you're not going to have this super long lead time on your device, most likely. And you're going to be able to purchase the device, get it in during your slower season, have your providers get trained up, do several trainings, advanced trainings, get some good patients under the belt. So that way you're ready when the busy season hits. Right now, just way practices and patients are conditioned is, September, October is the start of the busy season. Yeah. And so I think I'm one where I want to be a little bit more prepared. I want to prep. So I think earlier in the year tends to be a little bit better because from provider standpoint, I don't want to get something new that I don't have a ton of experience on and then be slammed. Like it's nice to kind of have like the training wheels on a little bit, right?
So what does that ramp up time look like? So you get a new device into a clinic. It's their first laser. They know nothing. How fast can they get trained? How fast can you train their staff? How many hours does it take? Because as you and I have talked about countless times before, the staff's knowledge of these products or devices is drastically impacting their sales, right? Yeah. Their ability to sell these things as well. So how long does it take these practices to get trained and educated on these devices?
So, typically when purchasing a device, you're going to have that device get installed in your clinic, and then you're going to have your clinical training sometime in the next few days to a couple weeks after that install. That clinical training typically is going to be, depending on what the device is, anything from a couple hours to a full day, sometimes 2 days. That should, assuming at this point, if you're a provider, especially in the state of California, you're at least an RN, so you should have at least a good baseline understanding of medicine, safety, patient awareness, right? So ideally you're not starting from too much of a scratch point, but you're going to have that, say, 1 day of full training. What I like to encourage practices that I work with to do is I want to send them all their clinical training resources prior to their clinical training. So that way the different RNs or the doctor, whoever is going to be using that device, have those to research prior. watch some webinars. Like, it is what you put into it, right? Like, I know some doctors and RNs that are phenomenal providers that I would trust, and I know some that are not so good, right? And it usually comes down to what is the effort that you put in to hone your craft.
Right.
If you're a lazy provider who doesn't put in the effort, like, you're gonna have substandard results.
Do all the companies, you said you like to send pre-training material out to your clients, do all the companies do that? Do all the reps do that?
Reps, probably not. I mean, I don't necessarily know what every other rep is doing. I try to focus on what I can do to help the people I work with the most. You know, companies are always going to have some sort of training education, but, you know, are they going to have webinars available or advanced training resources, like, you know, after the fact, right?
Right.
It's just going to depend on the company. There's some that do, some that don't. You know, some that I've liked about the two companies I've worked with is you have that initial clinical training. And if you're wanting additional resources, you can, you know, watch webinars, go to an event and learn more there, be connected with like a speaker or a KOL or Lumenis.
Lumenis puts on additional events too that they can learn more about the devices.
Yeah, Lumenis does. My previous time at Sciaton, they did as well. And then that's also something where, you know, if maybe you've bought a device, you're needing some additional help, like, ask the rep to help you out, right?
Right.
Like, I think it's good to have a good rep relationship because, you know, I myself can help with understanding and helping to train, but also I know where to point you for these different resources.
Sure. And so these devices, they're not cheap, right? Like, they can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, as much as a Lamborghini.
Yes.
Why not just buy like a cheap China version?
So your Temu and Wish.com lasers tend to have a couple problems. One, at the most basic level of aesthetics, this is still medicine and patient care, right? You're still taking care of people. You shouldn't go the cheap discount route when you're doing a treatment on someone's face. That's just like pure, I feel like, ethics at that point, right?
Right.
But I get people want a good deal. The issue with those cheaper devices, there's going to be a lot of aspects when it comes to, one, quality, the speed of treatment, your overall result, and then sometimes it's also on like the post-sale side. Like, is there any training at all other than just like a flash drive, right? Like, I've seen a huge spectrum where someone literally bought like AliExpress laser and you don't get crap for training, versus some of the lower end companies where, okay, you get some training, but if the device breaks down or you need some help after the fact, like, good luck. Versus the higher ticket priced items tend to be from more larger, more established, reputable companies like Lumenis or Sciaton. Again, I'm just going to say them because they're the two that I have the most experience with. Right. You have options to continue your education, or the biggest thing is lasers are complicated devices. Like, there's a lot going in on there. I know all about how the laser works, but I don't know how to fix it. And if you're going to buy something that doesn't have that support after the fact because you wanted to save a lot of money and you bought it used.
Yeah. That happened to one of my clients. We actually lost them as a client because they had one device that was like, they were rocking. His wife ran it. She crushed it. She was like worldwide known, and then they couldn't get a part.
Yeah.
And he's like, we can't run the campaigns. And it was like 2 months. And then they're like, we're just going to shut the business down.
Jeez.
I'm like, what? Like,
yeah, that's nuts,
like,
dude.
It's because of a part? It's like, why not?
Yeah, lasers, dude, they're a good laser is expensive, and they're expensive to maintain. But at the same time, like, it is a major revenue driver for your practice. Like, why are you going to cheap out on something that is a major revenue?
Let's talk numbers. What kind of revenue can these devices put out, right?
Oh, man. So, like, on the top tier, right, talking like max potential, there's people that make 50, 100,000 or more per month off of a single device.
That's crazy.
It depends on your practice, right? How busy you are and your skills. But there's people that I have personally sold to in Orange County and Southern California that they print money on their device. Like, they're making $50K a month consistently, or more.
Right.
And so, because when someone, complains, oh, this laser's expensive, it's $150,000 or it's $250,000. You're right. That is an expensive thing. But when you're going to pay that investment off in 2 to 6 months or even a year, Like if I could do that with the stock market, dude, my financial portfolio would look a lot better.
Yeah. So when does a clinic owner know it's time to buy a laser? Like when is that time?
Yeah, so I feel like there's a couple ways to answer this question, right? So one would be, do you have a complete service offering, right? And what do you even want for your practice from a service offering perspective, right? Like I think you have, I'll call it like the aesthetic house, and then you have your foundation, right? So neurotoxins from a non-invasive practice are going to be a foundation piece. Laser hair removal, typically considered a foundation piece. IPL commonly, or BBL commonly thrown in there as well. And then as you go like higher up, you have things that are nice to haves, but not necessarily important. But hopefully those things are going to also be a higher like ticket price, higher ROI with that, right? Because a lot of people, just to pick on laser hair removal, there's some giant companies out there where, it can be, $80, 50, $60 to do a decent sized area with laser hair removal. And if you have someone that you're paying $80 an hour and it's going to take, like, the profit margin just sometimes isn't there, right? And so I think one, as far as when is it time to buy a laser, one, is it filling a niche in your practice, right? Are you replacing something that is, dead and dying and needs to be replaced anyways? Or are you trying to separate yourself, right? So when I mentioned hair restoration at the beginning of the podcast, that's something where there's now some devices. One in particular, plug for my current company, they launched the first FDA cleared fractional laser for treating hair loss.
And so what exactly does that mean? First FDA cleared fractional laser for hair loss.
Yeah. So basically there's a lot of things that can claim to do various things.
Sure.
But having the FDA back you and say, hey, this is legit and this works and it's safe and effective is huge, right? It's also known that there's a lot of devices that just don't really work that well. So to have a full FDA clearance and be the first in its space is a big deal. And hair loss, I think, is a good practice differentiator because your patient base is 80 million Americans.
Right.
Like 50% of men above the age of 55 have hair loss, or it's like 80% of men have hair loss, and about 50% of women above the age of 55 deal with hair thinning or hair loss. So that is, okay, I have an IPL, I have laser hair, I have CO2, I have all these things. I feel like, if I walk into an office like, oh, we have every device, we're good, we don't need anything new. I'm like, bet you don't have something like this. And that's a good way to then separate yourself and bring in additional patients.
Right. And previously, were these med spas, aesthetic clinics, were they able to offer hair restoration services or hair improvement services of any kind?
Previously, what was available in the non-invasive space were more things like different medications, prescriptions, or over-the-counter stuff. So Rogaine, everyone knows what Rogaine is.
Yeah.
There's nutritional or vitamin supplements, herbal supplements, like Nutrafol is a really good one. And then in office, there'd be things like PRP injections, PRF injections. Sometimes people are using exosomes as well. And all those things can work, but a lot of them are kind of having the same way that they work. So it's not uncommon where, maybe that isn't functioning very well for your particular patient. Like, some of your patients get a great result, but others don't. Versus this device, we don't really have that same problem, which is cool. So those are kind of the in-office things, but a lot of it was also off-label. So Rogaine on-label, like FDA is cool with it, but PRP injections is something that's like just a fun medical gray area when it comes to using it for hair loss.
And so how would they would do the PRP and what? They were like microneedling the head, or how do they normally do
Either
that?
inject it with a needle or a microneedle, and then
hit it with some exosomes.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I know not too many clinics offer that.
Well, it tends to hurt, and results can be hit and miss.
Right.
Versus our Follix laser has been proven itself to be very well.
Right. So what are we talking with, like, these kind of results? Can it, like, bring a bald man's head back, or is it going to help with maybe some of this stuff that's going on up here now that I'm in my 30s?
Yeah, you would be a great candidate. You have nice hair, but
a case study.
Yeah, we'll use it in a case study for sure. So yeah, basically, we're saying about 4 to 6 treatments to get you a really good result. We have a lot of different studies that have been done, even some on like alopecia areata, which is pretty interesting. But androgenic alopecia, which is just normal male and female pattern baldness, is the primary market. So just as people age, they're getting thinner hair or their hairline's receding, right? Those are the ideal candidates. If you've been, bald for 30 years, I don't know, I haven't tried it yet. We don't have the studies exactly on like, I've been bald for 30 years and let me see what my result is. If you have hair follicles that are still there and they've just been dead or dormant, there's a good chance we can kick them back on. But you're probably going to need, a healthy amount of treatments to get that done if you're starting from literally zero, right?
Right. So 4 to 6 sessions on average. How far apart are those, and what's that cost?
Yeah. So for this particular device, it's 4 weeks apart for that treatment interval. So, let's say we'll split the middle on, call it 5 sessions, right? You're doing that over the 1 month apart. So in 5 months, you should be able to have a really beautiful response and good result for your patient. We're recommending about $1,000 to $1,200 per session, but that's also here locally in Orange County. So I would think of, what are you charging for PRP injections for hair restoration, and then apply it to your area, right? So if you're a clinic and you charge, say, $800 for PRP injections, which is pretty average, $700 to $800, and you have something that is less painful and more effective, if I was a patient, I'd spend an extra $100, $200 to get the less painful, more effective option. Mm-hmm. And so, I feel like that's a good way to kind of approximate your costs on that.
Right. So then, with these devices, break down like the costs on this to the provider? So they got to buy the machine. Are there any consumables?
Yeah. So, it's going to depend on what type of devices we're talking about, right? So in general, you're going to have the initial purchase price of the machine. And these are things that when you're going through the sales process with your sales rep, I would have them walk you through like an ROI calculator and be upfront with, okay, are there consumables? What's the consumable cost? What's the warranty cost?
Reps hide these numbers sometimes.
I'm sure some do. A sales process, I try to be as upfront with all of it, but it also depends on like where you're at, what's important to you, right? Like if someone doesn't ever have warranty service contracts and they don't ask about it, and there's so many other things that they're focused on, I can try to bring it up, but at the same time, it's like, I want you to know enough about the device to be confident in what you're buying and to do really well with it. And so ideally you're going to be going through, I'm trying to draw a blank on this one, but basically you should have a sales experience that is giving you all the information that you need on the device up front, right? There shouldn't be any smoke and mirrors, nothing that's being hidden. So going through cost of the system, ongoing maintenance costs, the life of the system, any consumable costs, and then throwing all those in an ROI calculator to spit out, hey, what is my revenue potential like with my own personal patient volume? And that's something that I try to do. I'm a huge nerd, as we've established from the beginning with the laser physics. I'm the same way with Excel spreadsheets. And I feel like that's a really good way to point out, okay, device costs X, monthly payment is Y. If I see 100 patients in a week and I feel like I can get about 5 of them would be good candidates for this, what does that look like from a revenue standpoint? And then break that down, right? Because if you're going to buy a device and break even with it, that's probably not a good investment. If I'm going to buy a device and make 3X, 4X, 5X or more of that payment, it's probably a really good investment.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of these people, they don't factor in the numbers as they need to look at it, and they're like, well, I can't. I do the marketing, so I'm like,
yeah.
What are we going to get busy? Like, what do you need more patients of? Like, well, I don't want to do that one. We got expensive consumable costs. I'm like, how'd you not know these consumable costs when you bought the device? So we can add as much value to these clinic owners who are looking at purchasing devices. Like, what questions should they be asking these reps? Like, what are some of the hidden secrets, I think, that a lot of people might not know when they buy their first device that they wish they would have known before? And what can you expose about some of the, I think we won't mention any brands, but there's some brands out there that have some bad reputations and some bad reps that are really just trying to get a sell, and they lie through their teeth about pretty much everything to these clinics to get them to sign that piece of paper.
Yeah, that's definitely a hard part about my job. Like, I try to have as much just character and ethics in what I do. Like, I've become friends with most of the people I sell to.
Yeah.
Like, I get letters of recommendation from some of the docs I worked with. Like, I'm very fortunate to have that, right? And unfortunately, that's not, because I believe that if I treat a clinic well and they're successful with the technology that I sold them, they're going to be happy with it. I'm always going to be welcome to their office. There's probably going to be other things that they would benefit from that I have to offer them.
Right.
But doctors are friends with doctors. Nurses are friends with nurses. So if you're killing it with a device and you're super happy with it and you had a great sales experience from me and good support from me, you're going to say, hey, I know you're looking for a new laser hair removal device or a new IPL or something. David was a good dude. I love my system. Give him a call. He'll take care of you. Right. So the amount of referral business that I've gotten has been a huge part to help my career and something I'm super thankful for. So things that I would say, if you're, pitfalls to look out for would be, if a sales rep walks in, okay, hey, who else has this? Or who else have you sold to? And can you maybe get me in contact with some people that you've worked with? Give me 3 to 5 names of people that you've worked with that, I can talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of times, they may not share the pricing that they got that system with. Maybe you're looking at a different system, but at the very least, what that sales experience was like.
Right.
Right. And ideally someone that, if you've been in the space for a while, I've been in the space a little over 4 years now, like I've worked at a ton of different clinics. And if someone says, okay, well, like give me a short list of some people you've worked with, easy.
Right.
Right. Because if you're going and you're just burning bridges, you're not going to last. And if you're like, I don't really have anybody to send your way.
Red flag.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what other red flags are there from buying a device or a rep?
Let's see. So I would say also network with other providers, right? Like it's kind of going to be known very quickly within a territory. So within your county of rep reputations, device reputations, and like you should network and that'll help you avoid different pitfalls. And one is also the vibe that you get. Like sometimes timing is just not right? Like I can try to remove various obstacles and understand what your objections are and try to find solutions that are genuine solutions, right? To move a sale forward, just like you would do with a patient if they're scared of needles, right? You're going to be like, okay, it's not that bad. Here's a little thing to like distract you and get through it, right? But if a sales rep is like trying to overly sell you on something that you don't even feel like is a fit for your practice, that's a bad sign. Another thing is, what is the average treatment price in some local clinics, right? Because common thing is there's probably a company that you were thinking of where, oh yeah, it's $1,000 to $1,500 per session, and it's 4 sessions and it's super easy, and then the street price is like $500. And
when you buy this device, patients are just going to be banging on your doors, waiting to get in.
Yeah. Probably not. Marketing and good staff are always going to be required. Just because you have it doesn't mean people are going to come.
Yeah, that's how I get my business is people buy a device and then they realize they have a marketing problem. Like, oh crap, this device is just collecting dust and I've got a $6,000 per month financing bill I got to pay.
Yeah, you got to have good marketing, but you also got to make sure if you're a business owner, you have, mid-level or other providers working with you, that you are also taking care of your people. I'd say clinics that I've maybe, rabbit trail into a different conversation, but, practices that tend to struggle continually, those breakdowns it depends on the stage, right? If you're a brand new person, new startup, okay, that's a little bit different than if you've been around 10 years and you're struggling, right? So assuming you've been around 10 years and you're struggling, if you're having a lot of staff turnover, you should really figure out why.
Right.
It's probably not because it's really hard to find good talent.
Right.
Like there's a good chance that there's something about what you're offering your staff doesn't make them want to stick around.
Yeah.
There's one of the largest med spas in Orange County I work with. He has a huge team of nurses and other providers that are there, and he has very low turnover. And part of the reason is he's paying to have his team go to trade shows, do these advanced trainings, and he's kind of paying the bill. And people, they're getting commission on the services that they're doing. So they're financially incentivized to do these higher, ticket item services and talk to the patients about them, right? But they're doing it ethically. And then they're also enjoying going to different trade shows or advanced trainings and having a good, company experience, basically.
Right.
But if you're a business owner who isn't investing in your people, they're gonna leave you.
Right.
Right. You need good people, good marketing, and good products.
Yeah. Yeah. I always tell my team that skills pay the bills, and you got to learn the skills, right? And these injections, these treatments, like they're very skilled things that you have to not only know how to do, you have to know how to sell them, right?
Yep.
And that's where the training is so important. So you're saying that these clinics that are crushing it and doing well versus the ones that aren't, they're investing heavily into their staff, going to these events, going to these seminars, staying up to date with what's trending, what's new, and that because of that, that directly correlates to their ability to sell these treatments and increase more
100%
patient retention.
Yeah, that, I mean, I even know doctors that, you know, I mean, they kill it and their team kills it. And I mean that in a very positive sense.
Yeah.
Just in case. But I mean, they'll even have, you know, do sales training with their team, right? Like, it's important to where, and this is not just your providers, but also like your front desk, right? Like whoever is there answering the phones as soon as I walk through the door. And yeah, I'm getting it from the rep experience, right? But at the same time, if I walk in and like not a single person looks their head up to even like acknowledge my existence, or if you're super rude to me because you just I'm a rep to you, like you don't know that until I introduce myself, right?
Right.
Like I could be another provider just wearing scrubs, or if I walk in a business suit, I could also just be on my lunch break in between office visits. Like you're everything from like the front desk to ownership. Everyone needs to be, you know, professional, kind, courteous, well-trained. That'll go a long way. You'd be shocked at the amount of clinics that don't have that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. What would you say is the biggest mistake you see these clinic owners make when purchasing a device?
From a device purchasing standpoint, I'd say it's one of two things. Buying a very poor quality device. I'm very much a believer in you either buy nice or you're going to buy twice.
Right.
Or the other adage is buy once, cry once, right? High quality equipment is going to last because it's going to give you better results. It's going to be faster to treat. It's just a way better experience. After you have it, you've had it for a year, 5 years, 10 years, it's still probably functioning. It's still probably doing good. The company actually services the technology still. Like that is super important. These are investments, right? So going the cheap route and just being like, oh, well, I need a laser hair removal device, but you know, I'm only going to spend $40,000. Well, good luck.
Right.
And if you do get one at that and it's new, it's probably going to suck. Or you bought it used, and that's a whole other discussion on why buying used equipment's typically not a good idea. So that would be one side. Or on the flip side is buying something that makes no sense for your practice. Right. So if you're a med spa and all you do is injections and your first device, even though I sell CO2 lasers, if your first device is a CO2 and it's just like some cutesy med spa doing Botox and filler, you have no business having your first device be a CO2 laser. Like, to do CO2 well, you need to be well trained. You need to understand that patient healing process. Like that's an intense device. And every now and then you see it and you're like, dude, why do you have that? Or body sculpting equipment. Like there's some good body sculpting equipment, but a lot of it is patient satisfaction after the fact is pretty rough. Like if you make someone's skin look nicer, usually that's going to last a while, right? If you help with their wrinkles or you clear a vascular problem or you do hair removal, all those things are going to last. People are going to be happy. A lot of the body devices, the results just don't really last if you get a result to begin with.
Right.
Because like your patient selection tends to be more narrow. Like
you're selling them more the dream versus the result.
Yeah. That's a very common thing where you see a clinic and they're like, their first 3 devices are, like body devices and then like a CO2 and like the providers, that's not what their background is. That's not what their experience is. And you're like, dude, that's putting you in a bad spot.
Right.
Versus like establish like what are the essentials that I need and what is reaching that patient immediate demand. Yeah. And also my provider skill set too.
Right. So having the right staffing in place will determine what is a good device
Yeah. If you're a facial plastic surgeon and your first device is a CO2, that makes perfect sense.
Right.
It depends on your skill set, your patients. So I would say, buying poor quality equipment or equipment that has no place in your practice.
Right.
Or it's not that place yet.
And you did mention speed, which we didn't even talk about yet, which is kind of surprising. Like how important, I think, these clinic owners, they don't see their operating these rooms as, price per hour.
Oh, yeah.
How much money they need to be making out of these rooms per hour.
Yep.
Why is speed important when it comes to turnover of the rooms, when it comes to these devices and, buying a cheaper device that might cost half the price, but it's going to take 2, 3, 4 times the amount of time to do that same treatment.
Yep.
How does that affect the operations, the profitability of the practice, and how important is speed in that?
Yeah. So speed is huge, right? So number one thing is always going to be patient safety, right?
Yeah.
And then result.
Yeah.
But the faster I can get that result safely, the better off. Like speed is what is going to either enhance or limit your ability to scale your business. So as an example, let's say laser hair removal, just because it's a very easy example. There are times where I'll walk into a clinic and I'll be like, hey, how long do you book out for like a large area? Say full legs in Brazilian or full back. And they're like, oh, an hour, hour and a half. And that blows my mind because there are devices out there. And yes, one that I sell, but I can turn over a room in 15 minutes.
Right.
Like a full back is going to take a provider who, yes, is a skilled provider, but with good equipment, 2 to 3 minutes. Full legs and Brazilian, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you're, let's say, doing it in an hour and I'm at 15 minutes, I can see 4 times as many patients. And laser hair removal is one of those things where you kind of have like your industry price based off of your area. Right. Like it's not like just because your device is better that I can now charge 4 times the amount. I'm not going to be able to get $3,000 for legs versus, this other clinic that's charging $300 for full legs.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the only way to really scale that is, okay, either A, I need to see more patients way faster, or B, I need to offer other services that are more profitable.
Right.
Because unless you're moving clinics and giving yourself more space and hiring more providers, typically you're stuck with your 4 rooms to treat, your 2 nurses, your 1 esthetician. Like you
You're paying
have
a nurse $50 an hour to operate this machine. It takes them an hour to do 1 full area when they could have possibly seen 3, maybe 4 patients in that same time frame and cranked out 3, 4 times the amount of revenue in that same hour.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where we're also looking at like, okay, what is the number one like injectable that you're using? Like I'm going to obviously focusing on the devices with this, but a good company that has a good neurotoxin that's a great price is Evolus with their Jeuveau. Everyone, patient awareness is, Botox is the Kleenex brand name, right?
Yeah.
And Botox is great. It 100% is, but it's a little expensive compared to some other stuff that is also very good.
Right.
Allergan, don't come after me. I love you. But if I'm a provider or I'm a business owner and I can get most of my patients to use, say, Jeuveau, I can have a healthy increase on my revenue from this doing the exact same thing.
Right.
But typically with the device side of things, the faster I can turn over that room, the more money I'm going to make. Or I need to do a treatment that is going to give me a higher ticket price.
Right.
Right.
And so that's where I think a lot of people, they look at microneedling, RF microneedling as this great treatment, and it does have a lot of benefits, but there's a lot of chair time with that, right? A lot of pain too. So why a laser over some of these other treatments?
Yeah. So a couple things. One, just the actual result that you get. RF microneedling is great. Again, I have an RF microneedling device that I can sell, and you can get a good result. But typically when people are thinking, oh, I have acne scars or I'm wanting to improve the texture of my skin, I can get a better result faster with a laser and with probably the same downtime and healing. Maybe even less, maybe more. Right? It just depends on what we're talking about. But typically, compared to RF microneedling, lasers are going to have a more controlled injury, and it's also going to be something that, in most cases, depending on what we're talking about, is going to have a superior result.
Yeah, because RF microneedling takes hour and a half of chair time.
I would say probably about an hour or so, but it also depends. Like, are you numbing in the room? Right. Like, what are you doing for your pain management in that case? Because if you're doing a deeper, more aggressive RF microneedling, say Morpheus, right? Like you're probably having a very strong numbing cream. So you're probably numbing for at least 20 to 30 minutes, if not 45 minutes to an hour, depending on what you're using. Or you're injecting pain management using Pronox, a whole host of things of what you do, right? Versus if you have a laser that, I'm treating reaching the same outcome or maybe a superior outcome, and I can get that taken care of with, say, 20, 30 minutes of numbing and do something that instead of taking 30 minutes of actual treatment time, not room time, but treatment time, and knock that out in 10 minutes, then I just gave myself, an extra 20 minutes to then use. And that over a full 8, 10, 12-hour day, it allows me to see a lot more patients
Right.
and make more money.
Right. That's what we're here for, making more money.
Yep. And I got all the nerdy spreadsheets to prove it in case anyone wants to sit down with me on it.
Yeah, you definitely need to project all those numbers out, because I see a lot of these clinics, they just have no clue. They see a device, they buy it, and then they come to me to clean up this mess, and they're like, we don't have any patients. I've got a $6,000 bill or $10,000 bill I got to pay every single month. We need help with marketing. And I've seen more clinics go under from device purchases than anything else.
Devices are really cool, fancy toys, but they can be expensive. But ideally, you're going to use it right and have the patience for it, and it'll be a very profitable toy, right? And it'll make you a ton of money.
So when purchasing a device, I know some of these companies, they offer some marketing solutions. Some of them might even bundle it into their financing. What are some of the cautions that these businesses should take when it comes to these marketing programs?
Yeah.
We won't mention the at least I know one company for sure that bundles in and taxes lots of marketing.
Yes.
And it results in zero patients for these
Yeah.
businesses. So when it comes down to purchasing, setting up the marketing plan, what's the best way to go about that?
I think outside sources typically, and I'm sure I'll get some flack for this from companies that I currently or have previously worked for, but realistically, like the company marketing, yeah, their brochures, their banner stand, right, their in-office videos, social media package, like cool, all that stuff, good to go, use it, right? But if I'm gonna do like my SEO on my website, or I'm gonna do in your case like my ads on Google or Facebook or social media advertising, if the stuff is getting pre-bundled in with the device purchase, there's a couple things that you should know about this. One, if a company is able to give you $40,000 or $20,000 in marketing, either A, the marketing is not truly worth that,
right?
Because they're paying a fraction of that. But another thing is, if they're just cutting you a check for 40 grand to then use, like, okay, that just came out of margin that you probably could have not spent. Don't get me wrong, like companies that I've worked with, they'll have different marketing stuff, but it's typically much smaller. It's like 3 grand, 5 grand, or 3 months, 6 months of like an intro thing with a company. That can work and it can go well. But a lot of times, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Right. And I think a lot of people, most people that don't work in marketing, they think of marketing as just this giant bucket. Right. And they're like, oh, well, I'm spending on marketing, so I should have patients coming in. Well, it's like, the first question I ask somebody when they say, oh, I work in marketing, I'm like, okay, well, what do you do? Right. So the type of marketing is very important to know like what you're getting. And with a lot of these bundles, right, I don't think the companies you've worked with have any red flags. But I know some of these other device companies, like they're literally putting on an extra $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 onto this financing bill. And then they're taking that $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 check, they're kicking it back to their friend's marketing company. Yep. They're taking the device manager is taking $10,000, $15,000 off the top of that check, putting it straight into their pocket.
Yeah.
Then they're running these generic ads, which don't get any patients in the door. Generally, these marketing plans are more intended to build awareness around the brand than drive sales, right? And there's all different types of campaigns, right? We can build awareness around Lumenis. We can build awareness around this podcast, right? But at the end of the day, these clinics need patients in the door, and you have to have very specific direct response marketing campaigns that can drive people in the door, and you can measure it and say, look, we spent this much money, we acquired this many patients, and if we spend this much money, we should get this many more patients, right? So you should be able to measure it. And if you can't ask those, if you can't see those measurable results or be like, cool, like what is it? How many patients did this equate to for the last clinic that did it, right? Mm-hmm. Probably not worth investing that extra money in or going a different route.
Yeah, I agree. If a company is gonna, again, get you $30,000 in marketing, you probably could have just saved that on the device cost, just being blunt. Right. Again, if it's in that 10K or less threshold, there's a chance that they have like a partnership agreement with that marketing agency,
right?
Where that marketing agency is then banking on you being a continual repeat client. But But if it's a fat blank check and it's like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, yeah, it probably come out a margin of a device company that's more of a marketing company than an R&D and technology company.
Right.
Anyways,
We know which companies those are.
yeah, so that would be the only time where maybe that's something that you want to do is you, for some reason, feel like you would rather get that money in the form of like a check rebate to yourself, and you're down to just get that on a loan and use it as a Section 179 write-off for that marketing expense. But you got to really know like your numbers, your tax needs. Like, there's a good chance that's probably not what you're fitting into. I've seen it where they're like, honestly, no, write that in, but typically not. And
yeah, because what are the financing? Like, how much are they being taxed on financing? Like, let's just say for easy numbers, they buy $100,000 device. How much are they paying over the course of?
Got it. Yeah.
What is the 120 is what they end up paying, or what, like 20%, 30%?
Yeah. So it's all going to depend on like your interest rate on the loan, right? So I think federal prime rate right now is right around like 8%. And so most loans are typically a little bit above that for capital. So it's not uncommon to see rates right now in 11, 12, 13%. You know, if you get a rate that's 11% or under right now, it's considered a pretty good rate.
Right.
So obviously you're going to have your sales tax. Like, that's just going to be a part of everything. And then after that, there shouldn't be any ongoing taxes on it other than the interest rate that you're paying.
Right.
But the devices, they're capital equipment, so they do qualify for tax write-offs. So if you buy, say, a $100,000 device for simple math, depending on the tax bracket you're in, you can write off that entire cost of the device to then lower your tax responsibility or tax threshold. But that $100,000 device that you bought, if you're getting charged 12% interest rate on the loan, you know, the loan is also where there's a lot of games that can be played. So in-house financing can be good, but also know the details of the loan, right? So the cost of the device is important, the details of the loan. Do you have things like a principal-only buyout option, right? Like, there's so many aspects with the financing side to go down, but there have been loans and companies that use these loans where there's no like prepayment buyout option. So then you're stuck with some crappy rate of 17%. You have to ride that out for the next 5 years. Like, that sucks. Ideally, you know, that part just depends on your credit, right? But ideally, you're going to have a loan that has a principal-only buyout option after 12 payments, right? And those are the lenders that I prefer to work with, because if I'm selling something, I want to be able to be backing that up, right? Like a year or 2 years later, when I see you at your clinic for the next device, like, you were still happy with what I did a year or 2 years ago, right?
So look at like the true numbers of financing everything.
Numbers are important. Just like, you know, on the marketing side, tracking your numbers. Like, numbers are so massively important. It's insane.
Any final words of wisdom?
Work with people that you feel like are good people, that you like that you would trust around your team and your staff, because people can have good and bad experiences with any company. Like, I know people that have had good experiences from companies that I'm not a huge fan of, and I know people that have had bad experiences from companies that I would consider good companies, right? But a big part of that is, yes, going to come down to, on the device side, your local experience with the rep. So if you feel like your rep is someone that is a good person or is honest, seems genuine, like, I think that's super important, because I also want to work with providers that I feel like I respect, that I like being around. If you get weird vibes from the person that you're buying a device from, you know, probably trust your gut.
Yeah. You got to trust your gut in business. That's so important.
Yeah. And if you're not sure, again, ask that question of, can you give me a list of some names of people that you've worked with that maybe I can talk to?
Right.
And it doesn't need to be a KOL. It could be someone local, right? To where, oh yeah, I've worked with this med spa, this doctor, this plastic surgeon, this derm. You know, you can call their office and ask about me.
Right.
Right. I feel like that's important.
Well, hopefully that was valuable insights to everybody. This is our first episode. We're going to be interviewing a lot more people in the space. The goal of this is really just to provide value, hopefully answer a lot of unknown questions. You know, as a marketer, I hear a lot of things, and I just want to help these businesses be more profitable. So yeah, David, great guy, very knowledgeable in the space. I've met a lot of device reps. I wouldn't bring on any device rep, just saying that. So
Thank you.
wanted to bring on somebody who I know has great intentions and is a character driven person, which is hard to find in business. So we'll be doing more of these. But yeah, that's a wrap. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, bro.